Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining us from. My name is Anna Yang. I'm going to be your host and your chair today. So welcome to Redesigning Work, radical redesign thinking to reshape work and well-being. So today we have a really interesting discussion, and it is the second of our event series that will look at how radical design thinking can solve some of today's most pressing challenges. This event today is not held under Chatham House rule, so it will be recorded and you'll be able to see this afterwards as well. So please post any questions you have for our panelists in the Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring it and try to answer some of your questions during the Q&A in the second half of this event. So today we have an amazing lineup of speakers, and this includes Jeremy Meyerson. He's the Helen Hamlin Professor of Design at Royal College of Art and Director of WorkTech Academy. He's a design writer, an academic, and an amazing thinker who has been the co-chair of one of the briefing for the work design, the work stream of work. Too many work words. And then we have Federica Saliola. She's the lead economist from the World Bank Group, and she's leading reports that World Bank that will publish soon on the future of jobs after COVID-19. So today she'll share some of her insights from there. And also we have Nassim Kurting. She's head of design at the Office Group, and she leads a team of in-house architects and designers who oversee the creation of versatile new workspace. But before we hear from them, we'll give a very quick overview of why we're talking about it today. So it's been almost a year since COVID crisis hit the world, and depending on where you are, it might have hit earlier or might have hit later. I mean, yesterday, a friend of mine shared a picture of when a year ago, I was going up the river in the Amazon, visiting a community. And so that was sort of, for my mind, like, my God, that was 360 years ago. The world was a completely different place. And I think, I would imagine that for many of us, if not all of us, this year has brought a lot of reckoning. It has unveiled some of the deep failures of our existing system. And it made us think about our living environment, our work environment, the current health system, and some of the more structural issues that affect our society. It also makes us realize how some of these systems are no longer fit for purpose, and they don't actually suit us for the world that we want to live in the future. So Chatham House and the Design Biennale team came together, and we created this very unique initiative that bring together the policy and the design community. And the idea is that it's a really, really big brief with a really, really big question, which is like, how can we help build healthier, greener, more equal, and more prosperous society? And so Design in the Time of Crisis is a global open call. It was issued in July 2020, and we invited everybody to submit ideas, design solutions from both design community, from the public, from the policy community, and also from young people. And it had the objective to really activate people's agency and then tap into their creativity, and then to think about new ideas and solutions for health, environment, society, and work. So today, we're talking about work. And just following the open call, we have received over 500 submissions from over 50 countries from across the world. It was actually a massive thing from all of us, from both at Chatham House and the London Design Biennale team. The global reach was something that gave us a lot of excitement in terms of, like, we managed to tap into people's sort of agency and creativity to say, what can we do about these issues? And in January this year, we launched the website. So I will we'll ask my colleagues to post the link to the website. And then almost all the submissions is now in an online gallery hosted by the London Design Biennale website, and it is for public viewing. And I think what's more exciting is that a selection of these submissions will also be showcased in June 2021, assuming that the vaccine rollout, all the lockdown rules are sort of deployed, and we will be able to meet at the Somerset House as part of the London Design Biennale exhibition in June this year. And I think the discussion today is a continuation of the call to action. And so we're hosting a series of online discussion. And, this is basically to tap into your creativity and to activate your agency, and for you to think about issues that you really care about, whether it's health, whether it's environment, whether it's societal issues, or it's work related. And so once a month, we will be tackling through online series these 4 themes. And so today we're talking about work. Last month, we talked about health. Next month, we'll be talking about environment. And so why work? Well, great design thinking can play a major role in shaping work, employment, and livelihood. And it can also, I think the most important thing is to support well-being. And it can help strengthen our resilience to the shock that's coming ahead of us, whether it's economic crisis, whether it's pandemic, or even climate crisis. Climate and biodiversity crisis, actually. And I think design can also create work that is more people-centered, support new systems, and support more interaction around people's well-being, but also how can we be more productive. And I think innovation in design can also improve working practices and environments through objects and space. So through our everyday use, or also through the system. So when we talk about design thinking, it ranges from objects to systems to cities. We have a very, very broad definition. And obviously, this is very topical for some of us who are based in UK. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson just announced yesterday a series of measures of easing the lockdown. And it really made us, at Chatham House and our colleagues to really think about how do we want that to go back to work? And when we go back to work, how can we sort of rekindle with the workspace, and how to make sure that the workspace serves that creative thinking and that dynamic, and then also the human contact, which I miss a lot. Anyway, so we have tons of submissions that address work in various angles. So you'll see, a couple of them, but basically we sort of showcase 4. So we have Cyclic Workspace by Nora Jonjan, Out of Paper Office by Brown Office and John Abbott Studio. We have Future Gazing by ACOM's Anu Chatterjee. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name. And Working Life, Quilt Sadie Cook and Jane Mansour. And there are loads of others on the website. So please go there and check it out, and also see if some of them stir up your creativity. So now we have this wonderful panel of speakers. So in terms of order, we will have Jeremy, Federica, and Nassim, and each one of them will have between 5 to 7 minutes. So Jeremy, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure to speak at this event, because I think the future of work is right at the heart of how we want to create our society and reimagine what our civic functions might be like. And last summer, I had the pleasure of being co-chair of the work group looking at design in a time of crisis. And what was really great that came out of it was how positive a lot of the entries were. They were fun, even though we were in a time of darkness. There was an exuberance, there was an optimism about the future. And if design is anything, it is about optimism about the future. I don't need to remind everybody that the global pandemic is the biggest disruption to our economic model, to our workplace system for 70 years. And my particular area of interest is the office workplace. And this has been disrupted in a very, very profound way. And so my role today is really to be a bit of a scene setter. And if we set it in an historical context, we can see if we go back 150 years, which is really the origins of the modern workplace, go back to the 1870s to today, there've probably been three major waves of work change. The first was what we call the Taylorist office, time and motion. This arose on the East Coast of America around the turn of the 20th century. And this was all about efficiency in the machine. There were modern industrial technologies which drove this forward. And the Taylorist office is named after Frederick Taylor, the godfather of scientific management, an American engineer, whose ideas were copied around the world. And you can still see Taylorist offices today. There was a decisive break with the Taylorist office in the post-war years. It happened in Europe, in Northern Europe, which had been destroyed by war, in Germany, in Holland, in Scandinavia. We saw the emergence of a new office in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And this was the Social Democratic office. This didn't see the office as a machine in the way that the Taylorist office had done. It saw the office as a community of practice. And the social democratic features of the office, human factors, more comfort, social interaction, these have continued to today. And the social democratic model is probably the basis for most corporate campuses. Then there was a third decisive break. And this came at the turn of the 21st century with what we call the networked office, the rise of mobile telephony, the cloud, the ability for work to leave the workplace. Except it didn't really leave the workplace until the global pandemic forced everybody to reconsider. The tools were in place. Video conferencing existed, cloud computing existed, but companies were very reluctant to allow their employees to work remotely until the break with the pandemic. With a gun to their head, we switched to remote working and what we're seeing today. And so we're in this period of not just crisis, but reimagination. We're in this period where we're absolutely rethinking, what are our organizations for? What are our buildings for? What are our cities for? Because most cities have been built on a 20th century model of central business districts, large influxes of people for the working day, arriving in the morning, leaving in the evening, a whole economic ecosystem around that. And we're now thinking, well, can we make the workplace better for people? And can we have a people-centered work environment? And we've never really had one. We've had a management-centered workplace, the Taylorist time and motion efficiency model. We've had an engineering-led workplace, lean working, total quality management, treating the organization like an engineering puzzle that only needs its nuts tightening. And we've even actually had a design-led workplace, with nice interior features, green walls, biophilic design, faux hospitality spaces. But going to an office to work is not the same as going on holiday in a hotel. We've never really had a truly people-centered workplace. And this is what I think the Chatham House London Design Biennale was trying to kind of grope towards. That's the big prize. So what might this people-centered workplace look like? Well, I think it's about a number of things. The first of which is choice. We have in retail, we have omnichannel commerce where people can, customers can buy through multiple channels. They can go to a store, they can buy online, click and collect, direct sales, and so on and so forth. What we might see in the future, very near future, is a multi-channel approach to work. People won't have daily attendance at a single building. They will work partially from home, partially in third spaces. And we're going to hear from Nassim about the office group, which are very interesting in this area. They're going to work in client sites. They're going to work in training areas. They're going to work in multiple channels. And what's interesting is we're going to start treating employees in the way that we've treated customers in a multi-channel world. So it's not physical versus digital. Everyone's going to have a digital workspace that they can draw down from the cloud and take into a range of places. And already we're seeing the legislation in various countries scrambling to catch up. In Finland, we've got a new Working Hours Act, which replaces the word workplace with working place. It's very subtle, but that's where it's going. As well as choice, we've got well-being. That's going to be a key issue. The health of workers will be important, that not just their physical, but their mental health. People are now talking about HR on the go, that actually HR will not be a physical function, but it will be digitally delivered into people's homes with support, and people are talking about new forms of leadership and management. Fairness will be a very important part of this. Equitable work. In the digital age, with the platform technologies we've got, we no longer have the equality of experience or work that we had in areas of so-called full employment in the post-war industrial era. That has gone. Work is very poorly distributed. You know, people working in digital knowledge work are on 24/7, whereas other people have only got 0 hours or part-time work. And we need to find a way to redistribute economic labor. And finally, connection. We need to think about not work as a hermetically sealed activity that you put in a box, but blended and distributed through communities. So we're going to see more mixed use developments, work put back into proportion. Part of that is developments like the compact city or the 15-minute city the World Economic Forum has been promoting, that we have work within a continuum of life. What is the role of designers in all this? It's about mediation of technology. It's about humanizing technology. And it's a very important role. And you begin to see in the slightly exuberant, tongue-in-cheek entries to the Chatham House London Design Biennale, you begin to see this mediation of technology taking place, like the out-of-paper office, reminding us of things we like about the workplace. And I leave you with a quote by Derek de Kerkhoff, who I met 30 years ago, a Canadian academic, director of the McLuhan program at the University of Toronto. And he said, "It is to artists and designers that more and more people will turn to ask for an intelligible and livable technological environment." That's the role of design in this story. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. That is great scene setting and a lot of insights that I have to think about. Frederica, please share with us your insights
Yes.
on Wellbeing.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you to Anna, Nina, and Michaela for inviting me to speak in this very interesting panel discussion. So I'll share with you some of the insights. Anna mentioned that we are working on a report or asking ourselves if we had to design a jobs agenda for the medium term, how that will look like given what we're going through. And I won't present any data on the disruption that we're living, how much COVID has been impacting the labor market, because I think we're all living and experiencing through this. And there are no doubts that the COVID will bring changes to labor markets. But what I would like to remark is that some of the ongoing changes that we are seeing in motion were already in motion actually before the pandemic hit the world. And some of the outcomes that we see perhaps could have been a little bit less negative if we had a strong policy response before the pandemic. If we can move to the next slide, I'll just briefly summarize. If you look at this slide, it shows the pre-pandemic labor market disruption. Now, we had We investigated those trends in the World Development Report 2019. And we saw basically three big changes then. One, it was that there was a rapid reshape of skill demand. Basically, what we were seeing is that there was more demand for those skills that would complement technology rather than the ones being replaced. Now, think of what's happening today. We see a huge fall of demand for low-skill workers, or for all those jobs that cannot be done remotely, right? And we focus mostly on developing countries, and we saw a huge acceleration of these trends due to the pandemic. Now, disruption of production processes, the second item. The main feature there was the landing of digital platforms. Like we saw, like Alibaba or Amazon really started to dominate the markets. And that was going to change the way of doing business, you know, bringing challenges for regulation that we couldn't address. And now look what's happening, right? How do you get, or at least during the lockdowns, how did you get your groceries? How do you know, went through certain services through digital platforms? So we saw really a booming of the digital platforms, and again, a big acceleration of what we were already seeing before. The changes in employment relationship, the third item, refers to the way we work. You know, what we call the gig economy. Like we're seeing already, you know, very kind of slow disappearance of traditional full-time 9-to-5 jobs. We were seeing people working short-term, freelancers, you know, again, dominated by the presence of digital technology. And again, a huge acceleration, because not only the companies that survive are the ones that, are the ones that are actually equipped or were already equipped for the workers to work from home, but a lot of businesses reinventing them completely. Right, like in Italy, for example, all restaurants are closed now at 6 o'clock. So how people get food? Through deliveries, right? So that is giving birth to a new employment relationship. So what we were seeing before, again, gets accelerated today. So this is not to say that it's exactly the same thing. Like we see a huge shock in demand. Like firms, when you know, were not affected by technology the same way they've been affected by the COVID. Like a lot of firms, they had to shut down their business because the employees couldn't go to work. Some of them couldn't get the intermediate goods. There was a big fall in demand for products. So that shock wasn't there. So in thinking about the policy for a recovery phase, we'll have to bring that huge, difficult element into the picture. But what were the main takeaways before the crisis? Strengthening social protection, right? We needed access to universal social protection, because if you are a gig worker, you're not protected because you don't have a traditional 9-to-5 jobs. You know, a lot of people work informally. So who had access to social protection? Very few. Labor regulation were oftentimes harming firms' ability to transition, to adjust. So we were advocating for more balanced labor regulations. We're thinking of a lifelong learning, right? What we see today, the quick changes of jobs, and as Jeremy said, that will most likely be the future. It was already kind of in motion, like people were having not just one career, but several careers during their lifetime. So that education that only takes place, during secondary, tertiary wasn't working already, because by the time people get to work, it was already obsolete, the skill that they learned. So rethinking education, rethinking lifelong, and of course adapting market regulation, taxation. Like a lot of these policy recommendations, didn't see any uptake. So if we had that, perhaps some of, and this is just speculation, some of the outcomes would have been a little bit better. And when we think about design, if we can please move to the next slide, I wanted just to show you some numbers, because, countries didn't take actions for the past years, but they took action over the past 9 months. So we saw a huge and unprecedented response. So whether this is a change in policy or whether it's a short-term action, it is unbelievable. This slide shows, that between March and December, we saw almost 1,500 social protection measures in place, and this is global, right? So developing countries, developed, and and everybody. So of course, how they were really designed, those policies, well, there was no targeting because it was just, okay, give income, support firms, no conditionalities. So this is something that, afterwards, when we move from the short term to the medium or recovery, what's going to happen to these things? So this has also been shaking. If we think about policy response, policy design, this is something, I have data for social protection that can assure you there are data for many other sectors. Now, this is relevant for what we're talking today, but this has been on the health front, on the firms front. So it's been a lot of measures put in place in, very in the short term. Can we please move to the next slide? The next one, please. Yeah. So the composition is also different because you see the high-income countries, which is the first bar on the left, intervene on supporting income with social insurance, but also with labor market, what we call the active labor market policies, which is the gray area, the 21%. Look at the poor countries, which is the second bar. 90% of the interventions are just support income. There is no labor market intervention. So again, thinking about the future, this is going to have a big impact on the design. And I just would like to close because I know I've been talking too much, and I guess we'll talk afterwards about the design with two thoughts. One is that the design, I have another slide, but I won't show it, just not to make things complicated. But when we think about design for labor markets, it is one of those places where you really need to work on several fronts. If you only intervene on, giving, I don't know, salary subsidies to firms, it won't work. You need really a process of transformation that intervenes on several fronts, and that it is a difficulty when designing policies for jobs. The other one is that the pandemic is giving us new challenges because there are new trade-offs that we didn't have before. Countries is going to be even more fiscally constrained. So where you start with designing, how you prioritize with designing in the medium term post-COVID, I don't know how we can call it today, it would be extremely important. Also, because we have less data than before, because also that's another thing that the COVID has impacted. We can no longer go face to face to collect data. So more challenges, but some opportunities too. We talk about the green agenda. So if we design well, it could be an opportunity to address some of the challenges that were existing before and that we didn't address. And with that, I'll close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federica. Very, very insightful. Nasim, please, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I should start just by telling you all a bit about the office group. So firstly, we don't have all the answers, but we are exploring how we can support workers and what we can do for the office of the future. This is our portfolio of buildings. So we've got over 50 buildings across the UK and Germany. And I guess the interesting thing here is that if you're a member of one of our buildings, you have access to all of them. So this goes to this idea of ultimately having flexibility. So when we do return to the office, having choice, we see, is a key important thing. So next slide. So this is a sweet little diagram. This is not very realistic. I can't imagine someone would visit all buildings in one day, but it gives you a bit of a snapshot of the power of choice. So you can start your work day in one building that's closer to home or easy to commute to, and then move through the day to different buildings according to your needs. You might want to have a meeting in one or visit a cafe in another. So it's just a simple diagram to show how important choice is in your work day. So that also might mean choice whether you're working remotely or working in a different location. So it's a bit of what Jeremy said about choice being a bit of the future of work. So, and again, following on from what Jeremy said about well-being, these two spaces are two examples of wellbeing spaces that we've recently introduced. We have quite a few across the portfolio, and this is just two. So the one on the left is a recharge room. So this is an individual space where one can go to pray, to meditate, to take some time out from their day and just recharge whatever they want to do in there. And then the one on the right is a group meditation zone where it's a full sensory experience. So, you know, the walls, you can touch the walls, there's a soundscape on, and also a visual artwork that changes your chakras and mood. Yeah, so just other examples of spaces that support well-being in your day. So this next slide is another example of a space that we've introduced. So we're constantly seeking to find new inventive ways to support the human experience. And this is one called the oxygen room. So it's a room full of natural light and openable windows, as well as loads of plants. So we call this an oxygen room. And I think this is a lot about supporting different ways people like to work. So one might want to work in an environment like this. They might also want to work at their desk, but I think ultimately it's about giving them flexibility even within the building, providing lots of different spaces for focus work, for social activity, whatever people want to do. Yeah, I mean, we know that we're more than just desk-based people now. So it's about providing for that. And this last space, oh no, this is, I think this is, yeah, last slide, is about the role great design can have on the workspace. So here, we now know the office, returning to the office, it needs to be, there needs to be a compelling reason why we're coming back. It needs to be all the things it can be. So in this space, it's one of our spaces called Summit House. And here it's just an illustration of a beautiful space, but we believe it's a lot about light levels, it's about artwork, it's about materiality, it's about ergonomics. So all these things cater to a compelling office experience, which I think post-pandemic, people are wanting to come back to the office for. So yeah, that's just a little bit of an insight.
Thank you. Well, thank you. So we have about 25 minutes. So before I open for the Q&A, I just wonder whether, you know, after you hearing each other's sort of remarks, whether you have questions or reflections that you would like to share, and I will put it on the table.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed both my co-panelists' presentations, coming at it from a completely different angle. No, I wanted to respond to Federica talking about, you know, the predominance of one form of intervention and the need for a variety of interventions in the labour market. And I wondered whether Federica could just expand on what the ideal combination, you know, if you were playing economists' fantasy football, you know, what would be the ideal combination of labour market interventions, whereas governments are just protecting salaries with furlough, etc. at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. That's the part that I decided to skip. It probably was then a bad idea because I felt it would add too much to the discussion. So first of all, of course, each country has, you know, different set of problems, right? So the interventions, although we have, let's say, you know, a standard, let's say, group of intervention that I'm going to say now. I just want to emphasize that there is no, you know, how you say in English, one-fits-all approach or the cookie cutter, right? Because of course that needs to be really a good design is also an informed design. Now you need to understand exactly what is the problem. So what interventions? So what we observed through the years is that if you enhance growth in a country, you know, a country can have a huge growth of GDP, but yet you don't necessarily see an increase in terms of the jobs created. And when I talk about jobs, I don't talk about any jobs, right? Because we know that, especially in the developing countries, everybody is employed informally, right? So we want the better jobs, like the jobs that not necessarily are formal, but jobs that offer people, to grow, to learn, to move, right, to progress, basically, with their career and have some sort of protection. So we saw that just growth doesn't take you anywhere. You see that if you only change, let's say, labor market regulation, it doesn't take you anywhere because, if, let's say, in a country, you improve the labor market regulation. So let's say you lower the minimum wage, but firms, really, there is not demand for jobs, there is macro instability, there is no access to finance. Those firms will not care about the fact that the minimum wage is a little lower, right? So what we call is a process of economic transformation, right? So that eventually is going to lead to better jobs outcomes. And that starts with the macro policies. So the macro context has to be stable because otherwise firms don't make an investment. And if you don't have a vibrant private sector, the good jobs are not there because the only employers will be the public sector. Then you need to have, infinite public sector resources or the informal sector. So if you want private sector jobs, you need a good macro context. You need, a good business environment, right? Firms need that enabling business environment. Right. So they need access to finance, for example. They need certain infrastructure. They need land rights, right, to do that. But you also need social inclusion. So you need social protection there, which is labor regulations, and social assistance and insurance. Like Denmark has this amazing system that is called flex security, where the labor regulations are very balanced. The private sector is amazing. But if you lose your job, the government comes in with income support and a reskilling support. So people can really stay home for a while and move to the next job, whatever that is, right? So you need a good social protection system there. You need good regulations for women inclusion, because oftentimes, if you don't have childcare, for example, women have a time to enter the labor market. We need product market regulations because that gives us what we call in economics market contestability, free entry and exit. That gives the firms that incentive to be, the competition incentive. So they invest in technology, they become more productive. So this is a process of economic transformation that takes you to the better jobs, meaning, right, the jobs that are more productive, formal, informal, could be rural, urban, right? So it is, and I had a slide, whether, I don't know, Suzanne wants to put it back, which is the last slide I had, we can do it later, where it really shows this process. So that's why designing good policies that propel good labor market outcomes, it requires to intervene in several fronts. Again, to create the jobs, to help, the supply side, so the workers, to be prepared for those jobs, and to access those jobs. So that's, I hope I respond to your question. It's a long discussion, but I think a very important one. So thank you.
Thank you, Federica. Just when is your report coming out so that people who are interested can go to World Bank's website when it's coming?
So we hope to have it in the summer.
All right.
We're facing some data constraints issues.
Yeah, we understand. We go through that too here. Yes. We completely understand. So we have about 20 minutes, and we do have some really interesting questions here. I was reading through, so I'm going to just read through some of them, and then I'll let you decide, the panelists decide what to pick. So someone's asking about Bruce. I'm not going to pronounce people's last name because I think I'm really bad at that. I'm butcher people's last name. He's talking about early signs of these transformations that you are all talking about. What about the work-life balance? Someone said here, Martin, what we're hungry for is human contact. That is one of the things, and being Brazilian, that's one of the things that I miss the most. I only see like 2 people in real life. A lot of them is online. So I think the thing is like, how do we deal with the human contact? There is a generational question here. Is it something that there's a generational shift, whether Gen Z require a different kind of work design space? And I'm just put these and then so for you to sort of think about anyone that you want to pick up. Oh, and then there's this last one. I'm sorry, just throwing a bunch of you, but this one really, really called my attention. Clara's point about how about detachable, easily transportable workstation like Lego.
Mhm.
Anyway, I just threw a bunch of stuff. Whoever wants to go, maybe Nassim, Jeremy, I don't know.
Yeah, I might try and talk about Martin's question about being in people's physical company. So I feel the same. I'm really, really missing my colleagues. I wonder whether now, I mean, this might be more of a question, but when we do return to the office, it just needs to be more purposeful. So maybe when we do return, our spaces need to be conducive to social interaction, collaboration, a lot of these things that we were working on before. It's more than desk-based, because I feel like we now know we can do a lot of our desk-based work at home. So when we do come, there's just got to be so much more purpose around the office. So I think it's a lot on design, on how to create spaces that bring us together in a purposeful, meaningful way, is how I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, I think I absolutely. I wanted to pick up on Alex's question about work-life balance. He says the chilling phrase work-life balance, and I couldn't agree with him more, actually. Work-life balance is one of those things that imply a trade-off between work and life, and that's been part of the problem. In the trade-off, we've given far too much to work and not enough to life. I much prefer work-life blend, because the future of work needs to be about a much more meshed way of living and thinking and working and creating. And when you think about work-life blend instead of work-life balance, you then begin to think about what would support that. And I'm a big advocate of universal basic income. I mean, it can't be right that an economic system like our own is so highly geared that most people in the country have less than £100 in their accounts and are a paycheck or 2 paychecks away from, catastrophe. It just, we can't be geared in this way. We've got to think about new models, a 4-day working week. All the evidence that I've seen suggests actually there are huge productivity and well-being benefits. So yes, let's think about these radical ideas, and universal basic income is one of those.
Federica.
Well, I agree on what Jeremy just said. What I can say that I mean, it is true. It's hard. I have to say I miss my colleagues, but we were already well organized because we are 14,000 spread all over the world. So what I miss in an event like this and the presentations I do, it's looking at my audience. Sometimes I do presentations, at least I see some of you here. Sometimes I look only at myself, and that's a very important part of my job, right? Because you look at people's eyes, you see who is following, and so I miss that. But I agree with Jeremy that it's good to rethink also the previous style that we had, 5 days in the office, and find the right work-life balance. Firms are really switching their corporate strategy. So they've invested heavily in allowing people to work from home, because that's the only way to be resilient in these days. So I don't think we can go back like, business as usual. So I also think it'll be most likely a combination, which in a way is a good problem to have, because what we see is that instead half of the firms, if not more, shut down. A lot of people have not jobs. So I just want to remind that it's still these days it's still big privilege to be able to say, you know, okay, I'm working from home, I miss my colleagues. But I see in the future, like more of a mix, but you know, this is just my personal opinion. We don't have any data other than this heavy investment that we see from firms in this new, you know, changing mentality too, because before a lot of companies will not allow workers to work from home. And it is not always easy, right? Because if you have kids, if you're alone, and, you know, everybody has, of course, different needs. But, you know, hopefully we can have a kind of a hybrid new model of working that is not just, you know, 100% alone or 100% in the office.
One thing that you said, Federica, about sort of, you know, and I do feel that, I know I said, I mean, there are a couple of things. I do miss interacting with my colleagues at Chatham House. I even miss the really bad coffee that we have. I can't believe I'm saying that. Chatham House coffee is renownedly, like, they're not very tasty, but I do miss it. But I think in a way, that's not the point I was trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is actually, we are very incredibly, like, I feel very fortunate that I have the choice of not having to go out and work like some of the key essential workers, right? So in a way, we're almost like, you know, we, as more like office workers, we have sort of this option of talking about how can we be more flexy and all of that. But I think something that you brought up, Federica, was also, you know, sort of social protection around the quality, not the quality, but better kind of job. So that, and then this is a lot of, a big part of the population is also grappling with that. So how can regulations sort of tackle, I mean, I'm just talking about two types, but how can regulations tackle these two types of almost typologies of workers? You know, just wondering whether in your research you have sort of thought through and found some insights there.
The typology are the
as in like workers who are doing, you know, more like manual work, that they have to go out and then have a specific kind of manual delivery kind of work. And then, you know, we talk about gig economy and then the security around that. While we have a lot of security being office workers, and we're looking for flexibility. So on one end, we're looking for more flexibility. On the other end, people who are more on the gig economy, on the flexible, they need more stability. So how do you manage the stability? I think that's my question in the end. Sorry, it took me so long.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, as I say, at the moment, you know, it was more, okay, give protection to everybody because there was no targeting or conditionality saying, okay, based on the job that you do. But one of the recommendations that we had before is to decouple social protection from where and how you work. So give everybody access to social protection. Now, of course, it for some workers, it's based on contributions, right? If you have, my director always says the best social protection you can give to people, it's a formal job, right? Because well paid, good quality job, because in that case you can pay, of course, for your, you know, contributions and get insurance, get a pension, get all, you know, the other things that you need to get. And that's how social protection systems are designed at the moment. So what we were saying is that, you know, social protection has to be universal. So the informal workers need to get it through some sort of income support. For example, if you are gig workers, then you need to start rethinking the contracts that these people have. Because pre-pandemic, we still could not classify, for example, Uber drivers. Is an Uber driver a wage worker? No. It's an entrepreneur? No. So what they are, if you can even define those workers, how we can think of social protection and contracts. So depending, of course, on the type of workers we want to intervene, but more importantly, the access has to be universal. And if you can pay for it, even better, to your formal job. But that's to be decoupled because the majority of workers are informal or are, you know, the gig. The formal workers, if you look at especially developing countries, are really a minority. So yeah, so redesign social protection system around this reality. It was important before, it's even more important now, because again, we get more people that have these, temporary jobs that are not the ones covered. We have more informal workers. As you can imagine, informality is going up. Or informal workers are manual workers. So a lot of them, of course, don't have protection. So it's even more important today than before.
Thank you. We have, let me look at all the questions.
Can I pick up on a couple?
Please do.
I just want to pick up on what Nicholas Webb is asking about the Welsh government and having a third of the Welsh workforce work remotely, and what pitfalls should they avoid. And I think it goes back to when you dismantle a very well-established model, we're in a position where all the pieces are on the floor at the moment. It's like a motorbike that's been, taken to bits on the living room floor, and you're wondering how to put it back together again. I think that what we face is the need for people to come together. I think that's what's really come out of this seminar, a very, very strong sense of the need for social re-engagement. This is why the Office Group and others, have expanded so rapidly, because even, there's this phrase, working alone together. You may be a freelance and working on your own. You want to be in the proximity of others. And I think for the Welsh government, and Nicholas is asking, what should we do? I think we should, have places for people to come together socially. And there was another question from Peter Holden, saying, I'm seeing lots of employers surrendering leases, transitioning to a work from home model, but then how do you address generational needs, social space for newbies, influencing staff? Where do you go to build culture, to create social capital? And in my own research, I've seen over the last year, and it answers another question on demographics, the demographic differences. I think younger people have struggled with the pandemic and the isolation far worse than older people. And there's a lot of research which says that the mental health problems are in the millennial generation, and in people have joined companies and never met their colleagues. They don't know how tall they are. They don't even know whether they've got legs. I mean, we're in a very weird situation. And I think we need to realize that work is not just about work. If you go to a workplace, people are going to build a social network. They're trying to meet their life partner. They're doing a whole load of things, which has actually got nothing to do with economic productivity and everything to do with their social development as people. We need to find a balance between the efficiency and convenience of working from home, which is not efficient and convenient for a lot of people because there's an inequality of experience, and younger people suffer more. I have a home office. My research students, I'm having Zoom calls with them and they're in their bedroom uncomfortably balancing a laptop on their knee and fighting for internet access. So these are questions, I haven't got answers to them, but we're putting together the pieces in a new way.
Thank you, Jeremy. And actually, there's a question here, which I think that would be good for Naseem, which is, something that you mentioned, Jeremy, the ideas of 15-minute cities.
Yeah.
And then this sort of interaction between your workspace and then your live space. Naseem, do you have some insight on your group into sort of where you see the trends? And
yeah, interestingly, we saw a lot of the buildings in the periphery of London were our most occupied buildings during the pandemic. So I think there's a sentiment there that people want to work close to home. They don't want to commute distance anymore. They don't want to be on the underground surrounded by lots of people. We want to be able to cycle to work. So I think there's definitely something in that. And this almost like we are seeing some larger corporations ask for hub spaces and with membership accesses to the various buildings, which is quite an interesting model. So you would have your hub space where you would make those connections, you know, the social engagements would happen, the mentoring, but then you have other sites that might be closer to home or in different locations throughout a city that you can work at as well. So we're seeing these models evolve post-pandemic, which is really exciting. It's almost like I know it's kind of a common expression, but it's accelerating the trends that were already happening.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes to the end. Just 1 minute from each one of us, a closing remark, a nugget of takeaway from the discussion today, or something that you would just want to share with the audience. Shall I start with you, Nasim, because you were the last speaker? I'm close to loop. Sorry.
I think from all the sentiments, the Q&A, the questions that have come up, and from the fellow speakers, I've gleaned that it's so much about social interaction still, and there really is a need to come back together, and everybody seems to want that. So that's exciting for me as well.
Thank you, Nasim. Federica?
Actually, just to build up on what Nasim said, when you ask initially the question, you know, how policy can help design the policy. So my views on that is that policy need to be informed, you need data, but I think as based on this discussion today, you really need to include voices. I was also impressed by the questions really focused on this lack of social interaction. I guess it's a younger crowd that he's attending, or at least posed the questions. So I think the importance, a lesson also for us, is not just data that we don't have, but ideally, but it's also really listening to the voices, because again, people might have you know, different priorities, and if it's not just a short term, but more of a medium with long term situation, I think that would be, you know, part of the diagnosis too that we have to consider.
Thank you, Federica. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think my big takeout from today is really the need for us to enter an age of experiment. We've got to experiment with policy, we've got to experiment with design, we've got to experiment with location, with technology, with workspace strategy. We need new ideas, we need to put them together in novel ways. And that's why we need design in the process, because it's the amalgamation of new ideas in novel forms. That's what's going to see a better model emerge.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I think I absolutely agree with you. I mean, you know, what you said in the beginning as well, which is that in this time of crisis, like the innovation ideas and experimentation that came out of through the submissions. And I think this is what we would like people to tap into through these call to action, is really, you know, so that we find also the interaction and overlap of different systems, work regulation systems, work design systems. And I think next month, sorry. This is another effect of COVID lockdown, is time has very fluid. So on March the 23rd, we will have a follow-up discussion on redesigning environment. And actually redesigning environment also has this, one of the key elements is also like, how do you redesign your living space, your workspace, how do you commute? And then obviously work comes into it. And then so in a way you can see that all these issues, they are sort of interlinked. But I think on the heart of it is about, you know, our well-being and the sort of a more human-centered thinking, but also ultimately it's like, how do we tap into creativity? How do we tap into agency so that we can sort of experiment and innovate to drive towards the world that we want to live in? So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the panelists, amazing. And thank you the audience who joined us in this discussion. Hopefully we'll see you next month.